She was going to be auctioned off in a night of sin, but a rancher did the unexpected. Lila lived in a small town, a place where everyone knew each other, where the streets were quiet and the days were often slow. Life had not been easy for her, but she was used to hard work. Her family depended on her, and she worked tirelessly, taking odd jobs wherever she could find them. She cleaned houses, helped in local stores, and sometimes carried baskets of vegetables to sell in the market. Every day she reminded herself that her efforts were for her family's future, and that gave her strength. Despite the simplicity of her life, Lila had dreams. She dreamed of a day when her family would no longer worry about money, when her younger siblings could go to school without her worrying about paying their fees. She dreamed of living freely, without fear, in a world where people could be kind to each other. But those dreams were fragile, because she knew the world had a dark side. Stories of crime, danger, and cruelty were whispered among the townspeople. Some dismissed them as rumors, but Lila had learned early that danger could come when least expected. It was a warm evening when her life changed forever. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the scent of blooming flowers mixed with dust from the streets. Lila had been finishing her chores at a neighbor's house when she noticed a strange feeling of unease. She shook it off, blaming her imagination, and began walking home along the narrow dirt road. At first, everything seemed normal. The familiar sounds of the town, the distant barking of a dog, the laughter of children playing nearby, comforted her. But as she walked further, the quiet became unsettling. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, and she felt the sensation of being watched. Lila tried to ignore it, quickening her pace. Then she heard footsteps behind her, slow at first, and then matching her pace. Panic rose in her chest. She turned slightly, hoping to see a familiar face, but instead, she saw nothing. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her from behind. Lila screamed, but a hand covered her mouth. The world spun as she struggled, but her strength was no match for the kidnappers. They were rough and cruel, dragging her into a dark, unmarked vehicle. She tried to fight, to shout, to reason with them, but fear consumed her. Tears ran down her cheeks as the vehicle drove away from everything she had ever known. Inside the vehicle, the kidnappers were silent, but Lila could feel their intent. They whispered to each other in low voices, words she could not understand. She tried to memorize everything, the number of people, their voices, any hint of where she was being taken, but the darkness outside the window offered no clues. Every mile felt endless. She thought of her family, her little brother who would be waiting for her at home, her mother who always prepared her favorite meal for her. The thought of leaving them behind filled her with sorrow. When the vehicle finally stopped, Lila was dragged into a large, dimly lit building. The smell of damp wood and something metallic filled the air. Her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid it would give away her every thought. She was pushed into a room with locked doors and barred windows. The walls were cold and bare, and a single flickering light hung from the ceiling. It was a room meant to isolate, to make her feel small and powerless. The kidnappers spoke to her then, finally revealing the cruel plan. Lila's heart sank as she understood that she was to be sold to strangers in a night that promised nothing but shame and fear. Her mind raced, trying to find a way out. She looked at the door, at the small window, at the cracks in the walls, searching for even the tiniest opportunity to escape. But the room offered no hope. It was a trap, and she felt trapped not only physically, but emotionally. The weight of hopelessness pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Hours passed slowly. Lila was left alone at times, and she spent these moments staring at the ceiling, whispering prayers she had never spoken aloud before. She thought of every small kindness she had ever known, every moment of laughter, every word of encouragement from her family and friends. Those memories became her refuge, a small island of light in a sea of darkness. She knew that she could not give up, no matter how impossible it seemed. In those long hours, Lila's mind also worked like a machine, searching for patterns, for mistakes the kidnappers might make. She listened carefully whenever they entered the room, noting the timing of their steps, the sound of the keys, the way they spoke to each other. Every detail mattered, and she clung to the hope that some kind soul, some unexpected hero, might notice her disappearance and come to save her. That hope, though faint, was a lifeline. Meanwhile, in the town she had left behind, her family began to notice her absence. At first, they thought she had stayed late at work or visited a friend. But as the hours turned into the night, worry grew. Her younger brother, too small to fully understand danger, asked questions that her mother could not answer. Her father, a quiet man who often kept his worries inside, felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. They knew that Lila was careful and responsible, and the thought that she might be in real danger terrified them. Back in the dark room, Lila's fear was accompanied by anger. Anger at the kidnappers, at the cruel plan, at the world that allowed such things to happen. She remembered the stories of heroes, of people who had stood against injustice. She wished that someone would notice her plight, that someone brave and kind would intervene. But for now, she could only wait, clinging to memories and planning, hoping that the darkness would not be the end of her story. As the night deepened, Lila realized that survival was not just about escaping physically. It was about holding on to her mind, her spirit, and her hope. She reminded herself that she was not alone. Somewhere, someone might be searching for her. Somewhere, someone might see the wrongs and decide to act. That thought, fragile as it was, gave her the courage to endure. In that moment, Lila promised herself that she would not give up, no matter what. She would not let fear take everything from her. She would survive somehow, and she would find a way back to her family, to the life she loved. Even in the darkest room with the worst of human intentions surrounding her, Lila's heart refused to break. She kept breathing, kept thinking, kept imagining the day she would walk out of that darkness into the light again. Night after night, the kidnappers prepared for the cruel plan, but Lila remained alert. Every sound was a signal, every movement a clue. She studied everything with care, knowing that one small opportunity could change her fate. And somewhere, beyond the walls, beyond the town, the world moved on. Unaware of the courage quietly growing inside one young woman who refused to surrender. By the end of the first long night, Lila was exhausted but not defeated. Her body was tired, her mind weary, but her heart still held hope. She understood that survival was not easy, that danger was real, and that her life hung in the balance. Yet she also understood that fear alone could not control her. She would wait, she would watch, and she would not give up, because hope, she realized, was stronger than any chain. Miles away from the small town, Samuel lived on his ranch. He was a man who loved the quiet life, the simple rhythm of caring for the land and the animals he raised. Samuel's days often began with the rising sun, feeding the horses, checking fences, and walking through the fields. He had a calm presence, a kind heart, and a sense of fairness that made people trust him. In the town and surrounding areas, he was known not for wealth or power, but for honesty and courage. People often turned to him when they needed advice or a helping hand. One evening, Samuel heard something that disturbed him. A traveling merchant passing through the town had whispered rumors of a gang preying on young women, kidnapping them for cruel purposes. Most people dismissed these stories as exaggerations, tales to scare children, or gossip among fearful neighbors. But Samuel felt a cold weight in his chest. He had always trusted his instincts, and his instincts told him that this was real, and that someone had to act. Samuel could not stop thinking about the rumor. He remembered how life could be unfair, how people could suffer silently without anyone noticing. He thought of his own family, of the lessons his parents had taught him about helping others, about standing up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. The idea of young women in danger, alone and terrified, stirred something deep inside him. He could not ignore it. The next morning, Samuel began asking discreet questions. He spoke to the traveling merchant again, carefully listening to every detail. He spoke to a few trusted friends, making sure they understood the seriousness of the situation without alarming anyone unnecessarily. Samuel's mind worked like a map, piecing together information. He learned that the gang was organized, secretive, and cruel, and that they had a hidden location where they kept their captives. Samuel knew he could not confront the gang alone. He needed help, but he also needed secrecy. If the gang discovered that someone was tracking them, the captives' lives could be in greater danger. He approached a few neighbors whom he trusted deeply, men and women who shared his sense of justice. Together they formed a careful plan, discussing the best way to find the hidden location without putting themselves or others at immediate risk. Every detail mattered: the time of day, the paths they would take, the sound of vehicles, the watchfulness of the gang. For days, Samuel and his small team observed quietly. They moved carefully along the outskirts of the town, noting every strange movement and suspicious vehicle. Samuel's experience with the land and the animals gave him an advantage. He could move silently through rough terrain, notice signs that others might miss, and remain patient when others might have grown impatient. Each day brought new clues, and each clue brought them closer to the hidden building where Lila and the other captives were held. Meanwhile, the gang remained unaware that someone was watching them. They were confident in their secrecy, thinking no one would dare approach them or track their movements. This overconfidence worked in Samuel's favor. He noticed patterns in their actions, how they came and went, when they were distracted, and when they were most careful. Samuel shared these observations with his team, emphasizing patience and careful timing. He knew that one wrong step could ruin everything and put lives in even greater danger. Samuel also thought about the captives. He imagined the fear they must feel, the hopelessness of being trapped with people who intended to harm them. He could picture Lila, young and scared, waiting for something to change, for someone to notice her plight. Samuel's heart ached at the thought, and he made a silent promise to himself. If he had the chance, he would not fail her. He could not promise safety, but he could promise effort, determination, and courage. As the days passed, Samuel grew more confident in the information he had gathered. He identified the location of the building, a decrepit warehouse hidden behind tall trees and thick bushes. The building was old, with rusted metal walls and windows that were darkened or covered. It seemed abandoned from the outside, but Samuel knew better. Every clue he had collected pointed to this being the place. He marked the surrounding area, noting paths for approach and retreat, places to hide, and areas where the gang might have guards or lookouts. Samuel also began to prepare practical tools. He gathered ropes, flashlights, and first aid supplies. He trained his team quietly, practicing silent movements, signals, and how to help the captives safely. Samuel emphasized calmness and careful planning over aggression. He understood that panic could be deadly, and that the captives' safety depended on their ability to act precisely and thoughtfully. His leadership was quiet but firm, inspiring confidence in his team. Late one evening, Samuel finally felt ready. The plan was in place, the timing calculated, and the team prepared. Yet, despite all the preparation, he could not help but feel a sense of worry. He knew the gang was dangerous, that they were unpredictable, and that there was no guarantee of success. But Samuel also knew that inaction was not an option. He thought of Lila again, of the young woman trapped in fear and darkness, and he felt a surge of determination. Courage, he realized, was not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Samuel decided to move forward, but with extreme caution. He approached the area near the warehouse, under the cover of darkness, careful to avoid making noise. His team followed silently behind him, every member alert and aware of the stakes. Samuel scanned the surroundings, noting the position of guards, listening to any unusual sounds, and communicating with subtle signals. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. Inside the warehouse, Lila's fear remained constant. She had begun to notice sounds outside her room. Footsteps, voices, a faint rustling in the trees. She did not yet understand who or what it was, but something inside her told her that change might be coming. Her mind clung to the hope that someone might intervene, that she might not be completely alone. She imagined all sorts of scenarios, some hopeful, some frightening. She could not act yet, but she remained alert, listening for any chance to seize her freedom. Samuel's careful observation paid off. He identified a weak point in the gang's routine, a time when a guard would leave his post for a short while. This was the opportunity they needed, a brief moment when they could enter the property without being immediately detected. Samuel relayed the plan to his team, ensuring that everyone knew their roles and movements. The success of the rescue depended on precision and timing, and Samuel was determined to make every second count. As he waited for the right moment, Samuel reflected on the importance of courage and responsibility. He thought about the town, the families, and the people who trusted him to act when no one else would. He realized that true courage was not about glory or recognition, but about standing up for those who could not defend themselves. This thought strengthened him, giving him clarity and focus. He would not fail Lila. The night deepened, shadows stretching long over the trees and the building. Samuel crouched in the darkness, alert, listening to the sounds of the wind, the faint movement of the gang, and the distant noises of the town. He could feel the tension in his chest, a mix of fear and determination. Every second mattered. Every step was a choice. He reminded himself that patience and calm would be the keys to success. At that moment, Samuel felt a quiet resolve settle over him. He was not just a rancher protecting his land or neighbors. He was someone who had the chance to make a difference, to save a life in the face of cruelty and injustice. He would act carefully, bravely, and thoughtfully. And he knew that this night could change everything, not only for Lila but for the community as a whole. Hope, he realized, was not passive. It required courage, planning, and action. With his team in position and the moment approaching, Samuel prepared to move. The plan was simple but risky. Enter quietly, create a safe path for the captives, and avoid unnecessary confrontation. Samuel knew the gang would not give up easily, and that the smallest mistake could be disastrous. Yet he felt ready, confident in his preparation, in his team, and in his commitment to justice. This was more than a rescue. It was a test of courage, compassion, and human determination. And so, under the cover of the night, Samuel waited for the exact moment to act, knowing that the next few hours could decide a life, a future, and a story that would be told for years to come. The night had grown deeper, darker, and quieter, but the tension around the warehouse seemed to thicken. Lila, trapped in her small room, listened carefully. Every sound, the distant creak of a door, the shuffle of footsteps, the faint hum of the wind through the broken windows, felt amplified in the silence. She had grown accustomed to the darkness around her, but it no longer brought calm. Instead, it reminded her of the danger she faced. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a mixture of fear and alertness that kept her awake. She could not sleep. She could only wait, watch, and hope. Her mind wandered to her family, thinking of her younger siblings, her mother, and her father. She imagined them worried, imagining her in some unknown place, and she felt a pang of guilt for leaving them so suddenly. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them quickly. Crying would not change her situation. She had learned, in the few days she had been captive, that she needed to conserve her energy, to stay alert, and to observe. The room offered no comfort, only the cold walls and the small flickering light. Outside, Samuel crouched behind the thick bushes, watching the warehouse carefully. His eyes scanned every inch of the property, from the broken fence to the faint glow of lights in the windows. He could see the movements of the gang's guards, their predictable routines, and the weak points in their watch. He whispered instructions to his team in subtle signals, ensuring they remained quiet, coordinated, and alert. Every step had to be precise. One wrong move could endanger not only their mission, but also Lila's life. The tension among Samuel's team was palpable, though they trusted his judgment completely. They had followed his instructions without question, knowing that his experience, patience, and calmness made him the leader they could rely on. Each member was focused on their part of the plan, watching the guards, providing backup, and preparing to guide the captives safely. Samuel had made it clear that there was no room for hesitation or panic. Courage, he had explained, was most important when fear was strongest. Inside the warehouse, Lila tried to remember everything she had learned about the building. The guards came and went at predictable times, and there were patterns in the way the gang moved through the rooms. She noted every door, every small crack in the walls, and even the direction of the wind from the broken windows. These details seemed trivial in the moment, but she understood that her observation could be the key to survival. Even though she was terrified, she refused to give in to hopelessness. Hours passed slowly, with both Lila and Samuel waiting for the right moment. Lila, though exhausted, remained alert, listening for any sound that could hint at a change. She wondered if anyone knew she was trapped, if anyone was searching for her, or if she was completely alone in the world. The thought of someone coming to help her seemed almost impossible, yet she clung to that tiny spark of hope. She repeated silent prayers, imagining a kind face coming to save her from the nightmare she could not escape on her own. Samuel, meanwhile, felt the pressure of the night weighing on him. Every second felt critical. He reviewed his plan quietly in his mind, imagining every possible scenario, every obstacle they might encounter. He thought about the captives, imagining their fear and confusion, and it strengthened his resolve. Samuel understood that fear could paralyze people, but action, even careful and cautious action, could bring hope and safety. He reminded himself that patience and observation were their greatest tools. The first part of the plan was to create a small distraction near the back of the building. Samuel's team moved carefully through the trees, their footsteps silent on the soft earth. A small flare of light, a faint noise, drew one of the guards away from the main entrance. The timing had to be perfect. Samuel watched closely, signaling with subtle gestures, making sure the guard's attention remained focused on the distraction and not on anything else. Inside, Lila noticed the change almost immediately. She heard a noise from outside her room, subtle at first, but different from the usual movements of the gang. Her heart skipped a beat. She did not know what was happening, but she felt a surge of cautious hope. She remained still, listening carefully. The guards were distracted, and Samuel's careful plan was already in motion. Lila could sense that something unusual was happening, though she could not yet see it. The tension increased as the second phase of the plan began. Samuel and his team moved toward the main entrance. They knew the gang would be alert, but their goal was not to fight. They wanted to guide the captives safely out. Samuel whispered instructions, and his team followed, their movements synchronized, like a well-practiced dance. Every gesture had meaning, every step was calculated, and every breath was measured. The night seemed to hold its breath along with them. Meanwhile, Lila noticed another change. The lock on her door had been tampered with ever so slightly. She had been observing the door for hours, and now she noticed the faint scratch marks on the wood, a small clue that someone was trying to help her. Her hope grew cautiously. She stayed alert, ready to move at the right moment, but careful not to make a sound. Every instinct she had learned in those terrifying days told her that patience could save her life. The moment finally arrived. Samuel gave the signal, and his team moved in quietly but decisively. They unlocked the doors to the rooms where the captives were held, moving carefully to avoid alerting the gang. Lila heard the sound of a door opening and someone whispering gently, telling her to stay calm and follow them. Her heart raced. Could this be real? Could someone actually be here to save her? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and followed the voice. The path to safety was narrow and tense. The captives were guided quietly, moving through corridors and staircases, avoiding the main areas where the gang might notice them. Samuel's team covered every angle, signaling to each other with subtle gestures, ready to respond to any unexpected danger. Lila clung to hope and courage as they moved through the dark building, step by careful step. She realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that could change everything. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing compared to the stifling darkness of the warehouse. Samuel led the captives carefully through the surrounding trees, using paths he had scouted days before. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the faint cry of an owl, was a reminder of how careful they needed to be. The tension remained high, but Samuel's calm presence gave everyone confidence. They were not yet safe, but they were moving toward freedom. As they reached the outskirts of the property, Lila looked back briefly at the warehouse, the place that had held her captive. Fear still lingered, but it was mixed with an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. She realized that courage, both hers and Samuel's, had brought her to this moment. She felt a deep sense of thankfulness for the bravery and careful planning that had made this escape possible. By the time they reached a safe distance, Lila could finally breathe more freely. She was exhausted, trembling from fear and adrenaline, but she was alive. Samuel's team ensured that she was safe before allowing herself to rest. The night of tension had been long, dangerous, and terrifying, but it had ended with hope. Lila realized that hope was more powerful than fear, and courage more powerful than despair. The first night of the rescue had passed, but Lila knew that her journey was not over. She still needed safety, care, and time to heal from the trauma she had endured. Samuel, though weary, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had acted with courage, patience, and careful planning. He had intervened when it mattered most, and he knew that his actions had changed lives. The night had tested everyone's limits, but it had also proven that careful observation, courage, and compassion could overcome even the darkest situations. And as dawn approached, Lila and Samuel's team looked toward a new day, one where fear would slowly fade, hope would grow, and the memory of this night would serve as a reminder of what courage, planning, and humanity could achieve. The night was tense, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Samuel's team had guided Lila and the other captives through the warehouse's hidden passages, keeping quiet, alert, and careful. But inside the building, the gang was starting to notice something unusual. The sounds of doors opening, faint whispers, and the occasional scuffle reached the ears of the guards. Their overconfidence had made them careless, and now the carefully timed distraction that Samuel had created was beginning to pull them apart. Lila clutched the arm of a fellow captive, her heart hammering in her chest. She could hear the faint shuffle of guards returning to their posts, their voices angry and confused. Every nerve in her body was alert. This was the moment she had imagined for days, the chance to escape, but it was also dangerous. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. She felt Samuel's presence nearby, calm and focused, guiding them silently through the darkness. His confidence was contagious, giving her a small measure of courage she had not felt in days. The first chaos erupted when one of Samuel's team members created another distraction near the main hall. A loud crash echoed through the warehouse as a crate toppled over. The guards, startled and panicked, ran to investigate. Samuel's team had anticipated this, and it gave them the perfect opening. They moved swiftly, unlocking doors and quietly guiding the captives toward the exit. Every step was precise, every gesture planned. Samuel whispered words of reassurance, reminding the captives to stay calm, to follow closely, and to trust him. Inside the rooms, the captives who had been waiting in fear now moved cautiously. Lila's heart swelled with cautious hope. She realized that this was real. Someone had come for her, risking danger, planning carefully, and acting courageously to save her life. She clung to that thought as they moved down narrow corridors, keeping low to avoid detection. The sound of voices and footsteps grew louder, but Samuel's team remained ahead, blocking the path, diverting attention, and keeping the captives safe. The gang soon realized that something was wrong. They shouted at each other, accusing one another of carelessness, their fear turning into anger. In the chaos, their usual control and intimidation faltered. Samuel and his team stayed calm, taking advantage of the confusion. They guided Lila and the others through hidden doors and narrow passages they had discovered during their careful observation of the building. Every moment mattered. The captives could not run too fast, or panic might draw attention. They had to trust their rescuers completely. Lila's mind was a mixture of fear and determination. Her legs ached, her heart pounded, but she moved steadily. She glanced at Samuel when she had the chance, noticing the calm strength in his eyes. He did not shout or rush. He did not panic or hesitate. He simply led, showing confidence that reassured the captives. Lila realized then that courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and unwavering, even in the most dangerous moments. Outside, the night air felt like a promise. The cool breeze brushed against Lila's face as she and the others approached the warehouse's exit. The guards, still disoriented by the earlier distraction, scrambled to regroup. Samuel's team blocked any attempt to pursue, ensuring the captives could move freely toward safety. Every step forward was a step away from fear, from darkness, and toward freedom. Lila could hardly believe it was real, but she could feel it in her chest. The promise of survival. As they reached the edge of the property, a few of the gang members realized what was happening. They tried to chase the captives, shouting threats and waving makeshift weapons, but Samuel and his team were ready. They had anticipated resistance and had positioned themselves strategically, calm but firm. They prevented the gang from reaching the captives, guiding everyone through hidden paths in the woods. The darkness of the night became an ally, hiding their movements and protecting them from harm. Lila stumbled once, nearly falling over a tree root, but a team member caught her arm and gently steadied her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the fear that still raced through her body. She realized that the journey was not over, but each step brought her closer to safety, closer to life, and closer to the possibility of seeing her family again. Every careful step was a triumph over fear, every quiet moment a victory against despair. The captives were led to a small, safe clearing where they could rest and catch their breath. Samuel's team ensured that everyone was accounted for, checking that no one was injured or left behind. Lila sat on the soft grass, her body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. She looked up at the sky, noticing the faint stars shining through the trees, and felt a sense of relief she had not known in days. She realized that they had survived, thanks to careful planning, courage, and determination. Even as relief settled in, Samuel remained alert. He knew that the gang could still be dangerous, that they might attempt to follow, and that the captives needed to be moved carefully to a more secure location. His mind worked quickly, assessing every possibility, preparing for any sudden challenge. He reminded the captives to stay calm, to listen, and to follow instructions. Lila noticed how composed he was, and she felt her confidence grow. If someone so calm and brave was guiding them, perhaps they could truly escape unharmed. The night continued with quiet urgency. Samuel led the captives along hidden trails he had scouted earlier, avoiding main roads and keeping away from the town where the gang might still have allies. Lila's thoughts shifted from fear to gratitude. She could not believe that strangers had risked so much to save people they did not even know. She realized that courage, planning, and selflessness were powerful forces. They could turn despair into hope, fear into freedom. Along the way, Samuel's team checked each step of the path, ensuring it was safe and free from danger. They moved slowly, deliberately, and carefully. Lila began to feel a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. She had endured fear, isolation, and helplessness, and now she was experiencing courage, care, and protection. The contrast was overwhelming, but it filled her with determination. She knew she would never forget this night, never forget the people who had saved her life. At one point, they paused near a small river. The water reflected the faint moonlight, and the sound of flowing water was soothing after hours of tension. Samuel allowed the captives a moment to rest, to drink, and to gather strength. Lila sat quietly, feeling the exhaustion of her ordeal settle into her body. But even in her fatigue, she felt alive in a way she had not for days. She had survived the darkness, and she could now imagine a life beyond fear. The final stretch of their journey took them to a safe house on the outskirts of town. Samuel had arranged for it in advance, knowing it would be necessary to protect the captives from any further danger. The house was simple but secure, with locks, hidden rooms, and a supportive network of neighbors who could help. As Lila entered the safe house, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was finally out of immediate danger. She could breathe, she could rest, and she could begin to process what had happened. Inside the safe house, the captives were provided with food, blankets, and comfort. Samuel and his team stayed vigilant, checking the perimeter and ensuring that no one was following. Lila sat quietly, reflecting on the night. She realized how much courage it took to act, how carefully planning and patience had made the difference between life and death. She thought about the kindness of strangers, about the bravery of those who risked everything for the sake of justice. As dawn approached, the first light of day filtering through the windows, Lila felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and gratitude. She knew that the danger was not entirely gone, but for the first time in days, she felt hope. She had been trapped, terrified, and powerless, but now she was safe, alive, and with people who cared. Samuel had acted with courage and wisdom, and his intervention had changed her life forever. The chaos inside the warehouse was over, but its memory would remain with Lila. Yet she realized that even in the darkest places, human courage and compassion could shine brightly. She had witnessed selflessness, bravery, and careful planning turn a night of terror into a night of survival. And though the road ahead would require healing, courage, and time, Lila knew she had been given a second chance, a chance to live, to recover, and to find hope again. The first light of dawn brought a soft, calming glow to the safe house where Lila and the other captives were staying. The events of the night still felt surreal to her. Just hours ago, she had been trapped in a dark, frightening warehouse, unsure if she would ever see her family again. Now she was safe, surrounded by people who had risked everything to rescue her. The contrast between terror and safety made her feel almost dizzy. She sat quietly, wrapped in a warm blanket, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Her body ached from the long night, from running, crouching, and the sheer weight of fear. But alongside the physical exhaustion was a sense of relief so profound that it made her chest feel light. Lila realized she had survived something unimaginable, and that survival was not simply about being physically alive. It was about having hope restored, about being reminded that kindness, courage, and human care existed even in the darkest corners of life. Samuel, the rancher who had orchestrated the rescue, moved quietly through the safe house, checking on everyone. His calm presence had been a guiding force during the chaos of the night, and now it continued to provide reassurance. He spoke gently to the captives, reminding them that they were safe for now, and that the priority was rest and healing. He did not seek recognition or praise. For him, the act of rescuing those in danger was its own reward. Lila felt a deep gratitude for him, though she struggled to find words that could convey the depth of her appreciation. The other captives were also quiet, many of them exhausted and shaken. Some had never experienced such fear before, and the night's events had left their spirits fragile. Samuel and his team moved calmly among them, offering blankets, water, and gentle words. They understood that emotional care was just as important as physical safety. Lila watched as he knelt beside one young woman, speaking softly and reassuringly, and she realized that true courage was not only about facing danger, it was about caring for others when the danger had passed. As the morning wore on, the captives began to regain some strength. They were provided with a simple breakfast, food that nourished not only the body, but also the spirit. Lila ate slowly, savoring each bite, appreciating the normalcy of it. For the first time in days, she did not have to worry about hiding, running, or surviving. She could simply be. It was a small but profound gift, one that she had almost forgotten was possible. Samuel gathered the captives and spoke to them about the next steps. He explained that while they were safe for now, they would need ongoing support, protection, and care. He had arranged for trusted neighbors and friends to help them rebuild their lives, to ensure that they would not be left vulnerable again. Lila listened carefully, realizing that this was a part of the journey she had never expected. Survival was not only about escaping danger, it was also about reclaiming life, dignity, and a sense of normalcy. In the following days, Lila slowly began to heal. She spent time talking to counselors, sharing her experience with those trained to help her process trauma. Speaking about her fear, her helplessness, and her hope brought some relief. She realized that her emotions, while intense, were natural responses to a terrifying situation. She learned that healing was a gradual process, one that required patience, self-compassion, and the support of caring people. She also reflected on the bravery of Samuel and his team. Their courage had been quiet, deliberate, and selfless. They had risked their lives without expectation of reward, motivated only by a sense of justice and compassion. Lila felt inspired by their actions. She began to understand that even in a world that could seem cruel, there were people who would act with integrity, courage, and kindness. Their actions had given her not only life, but also a renewed faith in humanity. Lila's family, once anxious and fearful, was now reunited with her. The moment of reunion was emotional, filled with tears, hugs, and whispered promises of care. Her younger siblings clung to her, unable to comprehend the danger she had faced, but overwhelmed with relief that she was alive. Her parents expressed both gratitude and guilt, grateful that she had survived, and guilty that they had been unable to protect her. Lila reassured them, telling them that she was alive because of the courage of others and that she had grown stronger through the ordeal. The community, once unaware of the dangers that lurked nearby, began to rally around the survivors. Samuel's intervention became a story of quiet heroism, shared not for fame, but as an example of what courage and careful planning could accomplish. Neighbors and townspeople offered support, providing food, shelter, and assistance to help Lila and the other captives rebuild their lives. The sense of community, once taken for granted, now became a source of comfort, strength, and inspiration. Lila, reflecting on her ordeal, realized how much she had learned about resilience. Fear had been constant, but hope had survived. Helplessness had been overwhelming, but courage had appeared through the actions of others. She understood that life could be unpredictable and sometimes cruel, but that it was also full of opportunities for bravery, kindness, and unexpected salvation. This understanding changed her. She no longer saw herself as powerless. She saw herself as someone capable of enduring, surviving, and growing stronger from hardship. Over time, Lila became an advocate for awareness and protection for others. She shared her story, not to frighten, but to inspire vigilance, courage, and compassion. She spoke to local organizations, schools, and groups, teaching people how to recognize danger and support those in need. Her experience, though harrowing, became a tool to help others, turning her fear into empowerment. She discovered that sharing her story gave her purpose and helped transform trauma into hope. Samuel returned to his ranch quietly. He continued his work with the animals, the land, and his daily routines. He did not seek recognition or praise, though his actions had changed lives. The town respected him quietly, knowing that his courage had saved people from unimaginable harm. He remained humble, believing that every act of courage should be guided by wisdom, patience, and careful planning. His intervention had reminded the town that true heroes often act quietly, selflessly, and with foresight. As weeks turned into months, Lila began to rebuild her life fully. She resumed her work, returned to her family responsibilities, and embraced the small joys that life had to offer. Every day she felt gratitude for the chance to live, to love, and to grow stronger. The trauma of her experience remained, but it was tempered by hope, support, and the knowledge that courage and kindness existed in the world. She no longer saw life as fragile and frightening, but as something precious, worth protecting, and worth living fully. The story of her rescue became a lesson for the entire community. People began to look out for each other more, to notice small signs of danger, and to act when they could. Samuel's actions inspired a quiet vigilance, a sense of responsibility, and a belief that courage could make a real difference. Lila, through her healing and advocacy, became a symbol of resilience, hope, and the power of human kindness. In the end, Lila learned that life could be unpredictable and danger could appear unexpectedly. But she also learned that hope, courage, and compassion were stronger than fear. The night that had threatened to destroy her became the catalyst for growth, for healing, and for the discovery of strength she had never known she possessed. Samuel's unexpected intervention had not only saved her life, but it had also given her a second chance, a chance to live, to love, and to inspire others.